Welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever wondered how some people just effortlessly cut through the insane volume of daily information, while the rest of us, well, we just feel completely overwhelmed? Today, we're diving into a brilliant concept that literally shifts how we process the world. We're talking about the secret weapon of cognitive frameworks. Seriously, why do some people solve incredibly complex problems in an instant, while the rest of us just hit a brick wall? It's the ultimate challenge of information overload. And to figure out the solution, we've got to look at how our brains actually handle facts. You see, human cognition absolutely demands structure. Without it, everything you read, hear, or experience, it just floats around in your mind as fragmented pieces of trivia. It's exhausting, and quite frankly, it's exactly why so many of us get stuck when we're trying to learn a tough new skill. Think about your brain trying to learn something brand new without a framework. It's kind of like tossing a new fact onto a chaotic pile of debris. The cognitive strain is just way too much. But when you introduce a framework, that exact same raw material gets organized into a beautiful, usable structure. The information hasn't changed one bit, right? But the organization has. A framework essentially takes information from being a huge burden and turns it into highly usable knowledge. Part 1. The Cognitive Shortcut, Redefining Frameworks. All right, so it's time we stop thinking of frameworks as just those boring corporate grids you stare at in business meetings. We need to see them for what they truly are. Without a framework, you're basically stranded on disconnected islands, struggling with this massive memory load because you're trying to hold on to 100 separate things at once. And worse, when a new problem pops up, your ability to transfer that knowledge is super weak. But when you learn with frameworks, you're building a bridge. You're not just rote memorizing, you're creating structured gaps. You are organizing your knowledge so it's perfectly primed and ready to be deployed the literal second you need it. I love this analogy. Think of a framework as a vast, incredibly organized warehouse right inside your mind. You walk in with a brand new box of information, and you don't just dump it on the floor, right? You know exactly which aisle, which shelf, and which slot it belongs in. The new info simply fills in the structured pre-existing gaps. It's so efficient, and it actually deepens your understanding because you instantly recognize what that new box is sitting right next to. You immediately see the relationships. Let's quickly break down the word itself. Frame means structure, and work means operation. Put simply, frameworks encode proven problem-solving patterns that drastically speed up your decision-making and reduce your mental effort. It's a structure that enables action. And notice this, it shapes your perception before you even make a decision. Before you decide what to do, a framework dictates how you actually see the problem in the very first place. It is the ultimate cognitive shortcut to reduce complexity and, honestly, save you a ton of precious time. Which brings us to a really critical definition: modeling. The jump from just being a learner to having true expertise relies heavily on your modeling power. What is modeling? It's structuring reality for action. It's the absolute foundational skill that builds your expertise by taking this unpredictable, chaotic world and organizing it into usable patterns. The situation itself might completely evolve, but your structural understanding, your model, remains totally rock solid. Part 2, building your modeling power, accumulating structural insight. So let's set a bold goal here. Aim to learn 100 frameworks. I know, it sounds slightly terrifying at first, but accumulating a massive variety of models is exactly how the experts achieve such fast and accurate judgment. Breadth builds pattern recognition. When you expose yourself to a large quantity of frameworks across totally different disciplines, like management, education, creativity, you start to develop this deep structural insight. You literally begin to realize that the universe loves to repeat its designs. And when you start comparing these different frameworks, you'll begin to notice the hidden structural overlaps. That right there is the secret to highly flexible problem solving across literally any domain. But remember, true ownership means you aren't just memorizing somebody else's tool. You are unpacking the underlying structure and rebuilding the model as your own. You're effectively integrating multiple frameworks into one highly adaptable mind. Part 3. The Framework Journaling Method, from Theory to Practice. Okay, so it's one thing to talk about learning 100 frameworks, but how do we actually systemize it so we remember them? Well, the answer is standardizing how you take notes. Every single time you encounter a new framework, you record it in a standard structure. You consciously pull out the implicit logic by logging the category, the framework ID, name, domain, originator, and source. By forcing yourself to use a standard record sheet, you stop your brain from just passively consuming info. Instead, you're actively extracting the architectural blueprint of the idea. Let's apply our journal to a pretty dense but fascinating example: general systems theory, created by Ludwig von Bertalanffy. Now, this is a massive, universal theory that models natural, social, and artificial phenomena as interconnected systems. It relies on the key assumption that the whole exhibits properties that simply cannot be reduced to the sum of its parts. It's a concept known as emergence, meaning the whole is genuinely greater than the sum of its parts. Now, if we just passively read about this, it probably slip right out of our heads. But let's look at how we journal its core principles. Look at how neatly we can organize the entire universe using these principles. It gives us a blueprint to explain, predict, and even design complex phenomena. In our journal, we log them out. Open systems, exchanging energy and info with the environment. Holism, making sure we understand the whole, not just isolated parts. Equifinality, which is such a cool concept, meaning totally different paths can lead to the exact same outcome. Then we log hierarchy, feedback loops, and entropy, which is the natural tendency toward disorder. By bulleting these out, a really massive, intimidating theory suddenly becomes a super handy checklist.
Next up in our journal, we extract the action steps. Instead of getting completely bogged down in the original 9 steps of the theory, we can seamlessly distill the application procedure down to 5 absolutely crucial phases. First, define the problem and set objectives. Second, set boundaries and a timescale. Third, map the environment and dependencies. Fourth, structure your feedback loops. And fifth, intervene and learn from the outcomes. Boom! We've just turned high-level academic theory into a practical, operational playbook you could use tomorrow morning. And this brilliantly illustrates why frameworks are so incredibly adaptable. This exact same structural thinking transfers perfectly from mapping IT resilience right over to tracking ecological carbon cycles or even predicting disease spread in public policy. It totally works for bottleneck analysis and business management too. This is exactly what we mean by modeling power. The situation changes entirely, but the structural model holds firm. But honestly, the real magic happens in your personal reflection. Imagine logging a personal insight like this: understanding systems prevents local optimization failures. By noting that fixing one tiny little part might actually break the whole machine, you are solidifying your own hard-won wisdom. This completely transforms a framework from just some borrowed concept into a highly valuable personal asset. Part 4, Mastering Complexity Like a Pro, the Ultimate Transformation. So this is where we finally cross the threshold from being a mere consumer of information to becoming a true master of complexity. Framework mastery marks the exact transition from learner to professional. As your personal list of frameworks becomes this visible learning map, your motivation just naturally skyrockets because learning starts to feel like a genuine exploration, not just rote memorization. Your thinking becomes entirely self-directed because you now think structurally. You can explain complex things so clearly. You can look at entirely new, unprecedented problems and solve them reliably, all because you're applying time-tested architectural blueprints to new data. It really all boils down to this: thinking quality determines outcome quality. Ultimately, frameworks shape exactly how we perceive the world. Mastering them is the definitive line between a passive student who gets totally overwhelmed by the pile of debris and an adaptable expert who builds a magnificent structure out of that exact same material. You simply cannot improve the quality of your outcomes until you structurally improve the quality of your thinking. So I want to leave you with this final provocative question. The world is incredibly complex. What framework will you master first? Now that you have the journaling method, it's time to start extracting those hidden structures all around you and start building your own ultimate cognitive warehouse, one framework at a time. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Now get out there and build your modeling power.